Welcome to ConnectionsHQ.com, the headquarters for connecting Christians.
Thank you for tuning into Connections HQ, the headquarters for connecting Christians. I'm your host, Chelsea Elliott. As we continue our series to assist Christian writers, we have a special guest today who's an amazing editor, Jamie Chavez. How are you today, Jamie?
I'm great, thank you.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I worked for a publisher in Nashville for 11 years, and while I was there, I was really lucky to be mentored by another really good editor, and she works primarily on fiction, and fiction is a love of mine. So anyway, I got started working for her. She had me reading through her slush pile, reading the book proposals that came in, and when I had a series of questions, things she was looking for, and so on and so forth. So that's how I got started, was reading book proposals. I also wrote cover copy, a lot of cover copy. This publisher allowed people to moonlight within the company, so I was able to do that. And eventually I started being asked to proof. And from that point, proofing, I moved backwards up the production schedule and I began to copy edit, and then finally I was allowed to do what we call a developmental edit or a substantive edit. And after 11 years, my job was eliminated, and I never in a million years had a son in college, had always worked in corporate America, and I couldn't imagine any other way of earning a living. But I never in a million years would have thought to myself, I think I'll get up this morning and go in and quit my job, and then I'll come home and call all my friends who are in publishing, because what happens is when you work in publishing for that long, people move around to different, they move from the publisher you met them at to some other publisher and then to some other publisher. So I have friends all over the country, and I started calling them and asking for work, and I got work, and now it's been 14 years since that moment. I love my freelance life.
That's awesome. That sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it is. Working in your PJs with the kitty on the desk, that's my dream job there for sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. So for those who are writing their very first book and may not be familiar with how things work, what is an editor? What exactly does an editor do?
Well, there are many different kinds of editor, and there's many different categories of editors. For example, someone who edits at a newspaper probably has a slightly different job description than someone who edits at a magazine and someone who edits at a book publisher. So it's very different. But in the publishing world, there are several editors along the production process. And the first one is what we call a developmental editor. And they use a developmental editor in both fiction and nonfiction, and I work on both fiction and nonfiction. So there are similarities and differences in terms of working on whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But regardless, a developmental editor is someone who's actually working on the content. And once the content is solidified and there's no plot holes in the fiction and all the chapters are in the right order for nonfiction, let's just say that's the place to start, then the manuscript goes to a line editor, and after a line editor goes to a copy editor. In today's stripped down budget, sometimes line and copy are mixed together, and one person does both of those. I certainly know in the New York houses, line editing is a separate thing. So if you want to discuss what line editing is, basically that's someone who sweetens the prose, sweetens the words, makes the sentences really nice, just says, if you had a little alliteration here, it might have a little more punch, or things like that. Maybe takes out some of your extra adjectives or adverbs and things like that. A copy editor then, and of course the author is an integral part of this. So it's a process where it goes back and forth to the author. The editor and the author are discussing these things together as a team. And it's certainly the same with copy editing. And copy editing is where you go through the manuscript with a fine-tooth comb and you correct all the punctuation and you decide whether something should be capitalized or not capitalized. And there's rule for that. Which has to do with the various style guides, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then after the copy edit is done, the manuscript is essentially ready at that point. So it goes to a typesetter. And at that point, it begins to look like an actual real book. You can print out those pages and they will look like what a book looks like, with the running heads at the top, the names of the chapters, all of that. But errors are introduced as a part of the typesetting process. And one of the simplest errors that can happen is because a manuscript is not usually set in justified text, but a book has a sharp margin on both right and left. It's a straight line all the way down the page. That's called justified text. And when you start working with justified text, you have to break words. You know, you get to the end of the line and you need to insert a hyphen and go to the next line with the rest of your words. The dictionary tells us where to break the words. The typesetting programs that are used don't always use that dictionary, and so sometimes the automatic breaking of words does not agree with the dictionary. So that's one big thing that proofers look for. So that is a proofer. A proofer can be considered an editor. Very often 3 to 5 proofers are used on any one manuscript.
Oh, wow.
Because people miss stuff. People miss stuff all the time. And let me tell you, I personally think I am freaking perfect. I miss nothing. I know everything, but let me just tell you, that is not the true situation of things, because I have on occasion been that person who took 5 proofers and had proofed myself and then combined all of those into one document and was frankly shocked at the things that I had missed. So, and that's why they use multiple proofers, because different people see different things, and there you go. There's more than one type of editing, and the author will encounter all of them. Oh, and I needed to go back to the style manual. There's a big fat book called the Chicago Manual of Style. It costs about $65. And that style manual governs everything, how footnotes are done and how tables of contents are done, and when you hyphenate an adjective and when you don't, and when you use an M dash, when you use an N dash, when you use a hyphen, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a bazillion things that it governs. And most publishers in the United States use that particular style guide.
What are the other styles that are used?
Well, the AP, which is the Associated Press, they have a style guide as well. But it's used primarily in the magazine industry and in the newspaper industry, so you don't really see it in publishing. The American Psychiatric Association has a style guide. Any industry that publishes books will probably have an official style guide. And but the one that I use and the one that I know from all of these many years of working with it is the Chicago Manual of Style. So it's not necessary for an author to know the Chicago Manual of Style because either the publisher is going to hire a copy editor, or in the case of self-publishing, the author is going to hire somebody who knows how to do this. It takes a long time to get to know it well. Also, many publishers, particularly Christian publishers, have what they would call house style. And they say, yes, we use the Chicago Manual style, but for things like scripture citation, they might decide that they want to not abbreviate any book names of the books of the Bible. and then there is the Chicago Manual of Style. And the rest of those things, the AP, forget about it. So, because we're talking
I use
about
APA for a lot of, no, I was just saying I use APA for my research articles.
Yeah, exactly.
I did my bachelor's in psychology and master's in social work, so we used APA for everything.
Exactly. And, you know, the universities, most universities have another one that they use that I can't remember the name of.
Is it MLA?
Yes, the MLA. So, you know, if you're writing a paper at school, you better adhere to the MLA.
Right.
But for our purposes, we're going to use the Chicago Manual of Style.
So what things should an author consider when looking for an editor, and how would you recommend someone find them?
Finding. Let's talk about finding. Hopefully, a writer is in a writer's group. That would be a good place to start, is asking other writers, who have you used? What has your experience been with them? That sort of thing. You might also, any kind of a group situation. I know a lot of people in the Christian industry are a part of the ACFW, which is the American Christian Fiction Writers Association. If you are in a regional ACFW group, you might ask there. You might also look at books that you've enjoyed, that you thought were well edited. Very often in the acknowledgments at the back, the editor will be mentioned. So there's that way. But basically, ask around. I get a lot of emails from people who say, I got your name from so-and-so. A lot of times you might have a relationship actually with someone who is published and who's been published, and they might have some opinions as well. In terms of looking for someone who's a professional, I will tell you that there are, and this is one of my pet peeves, honestly, there's a lot of people out there hanging out shingles, calling themselves editors. I have, in fact, edited a few of them, and by that I mean they're also writing. So the first thing that bugs me is people who have published a book and then they say, okay, so I can edit you now. No, really, they're two different skills that completely. And I have not written a book, don't want to write a book, not interested in my name on a book, but I do really love the work I do editing. So anyway, you have to know what you need. If you're self-publishing, for example, I know budget is quite a concern for a lot of people. But I tell people you shouldn't skimp on any of these steps, the steps that I talked about a developmental editor and a copy editor and a proofer. Even if you're self-publishing and you're on a limited budget, you shouldn't skip those steps. Right. Sometimes you can hire somebody, and I'm not trying to plug myself, but a lot of times I do a combo thing where because people used to try to hire me to copy edit because they wanted to go straight to copy edit. They just wanted to clean up. And when I was younger and dumber, I would say, oh yeah, sure, okay. And then you'd get in there and it would be so utterly bad that I'm just saying, no, no, we can't do this. What about the blah, blah, blah? So
they needed a lot more than just a cleanup. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm at the point now where I tell people I will not copy edit a book that has not been through developmental edit. I don't care if it was somebody else, but I'm not going to work on it unless it's been through that process. And if you want to go through that process with me, then I give you a break on the copy edit side of things. So that's how I encourage people not to skip a step. So that's the first thing is you need to know what you don't know, and you need to know what you don't know you need. And once you have figured that out, a really good thing to do is to look at someone's credentials. You need to know what the editor's background is. Has this person actually edited books? Because that's a big thing. Sometimes you have people leaving the newspaper world and then hanging out an editorial shingle, and it's just not quite the same thing. You might want to look at a website and see what credentials are on that editor's website. Are they authors that you don't know who they are? Or if they're posting testimonials, are they posting the person's name in the testimonial, that's saying something good about you? Or are they just saying that Joey said that, I mean, who's Joey?